This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Harles Carter. He was born on May 28, 1922. He served in the Pacific during World War II. He achieved the rank of Staff Sergeant. We are recording this on June 19th, 2015. I'm Will Hines and conducting this interview, no relation. So Mr. Carter, can you start out talking about being raised in Tennessee, and you were probably brought up in the Depression, so did that affect you at all, affect your family?
Well, I was a young man growing up in West Tennessee and going to school in West Tennessee, and I went to high school in West Tennessee at Alamo, Tennessee, and my primary grades were all in Johnson Grove. We had a school building and had a pump that pumped water we drank out of. Both old and new school. The first school we went to was a two-story school, and the next one was one story, was a new school. And at one time we had 100 kids in 8 grades. And now there's nothing. There were 3 stores, 2 churches, and a cotton gin. And my father bought the first farm of 28 acres for $2,800. And it had 3 barns and 3 houses on it. And we lived in a house that was a L with a porch all around except the back, the west side, southwest. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the east is east and west is west. Every place I ever lived. And when I graduated from high school, I went to West Tennessee State Teachers College. And it cost me $83 for a quarter, 3 months. And I had 3 meals a day, dormitory, books, lab fee, and interest fee, $83.
I wish it was still that same way.
Well, anyway, and I started out in pre-med, but after 1 quarter, I knew I wasn't going to make it because my background was terrible. Because in high school, I came home and my mother put my clothes in the wagon, and I changed clothes in the wagon, and I would try to get 100 pounds of cotton at night, before night. And then I'd come in, do chores, and milk 2 or 3 cows, and bring in water, and then we had no electricity. And when I went to West Tennessee State Teachers, I knew that I wasn't ready to study medicine. So I was there about 6 or 7 quarters, and I was told by an uncle that pharmacy was a good place to go. So I went to the University of Tennessee and asked Dean Crow if I could come, and I carried him what I had, and he said, "You got enough credits to get in." So at the end of the 6th quarter, I had gone up at his advice and joined the Reserve Corps, and at 3 months I was called in. Consequently, I went to Beardstown, Illinois after Fort Oglethorpe, and had 3 months of basic training, in which it rained nearly every day while I was there. And I wore out a pair of shoes the Army gave me. And then I was shipped to Fitzsimmons General Hospital as a surgical technician. And since I was in pharmacy, somehow I got transferred to pharmacy tech school. And that was 3 months. And then I went to San Francisco.
And what did you learn there at pharmacy tech school?
Just general pharmacy, dosage, and I had pharmaceutical math already in pharmacy school. And I remember the captain was he was a hot shot. He was good. And he gave us 3 dilutions of alcohol and said, "What'd you come up with?" So I had allegation, and I could do anything in pharmacy. I could add gram scruples, grades, everything, metric and apothecary both. And so I told him. He said, "How'd you get it?" Everybody else didn't know. And I said, "Allegation, sir," and that was the end of it. He was always after me about learning dosage of morphine and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I knew that it all came packaged in service. So I didn't particularly learn because of morphine syringes was the main thing. And so it took me about a year. I didn't do nothing in San Francisco. After a while, I got a job going up and down the piers checking rat guards on hawsers.
While you were in the military.
Yeah. And then I grew tired of that, and they put me in charge of checking boxcars. And guys breaking a train to put the cars on, empty them on a ship. They didn't care for us snooping. They had to get the number of the car and carry it to the captain in the office. And I grew tired of that, and I was in the Fontana building at Aquatic Park in San Francisco across from the, I've reached that stage I can't think too much.
Oh,
Alcatraz, when it was active. And we watched the guys come in and go out all day. Of course, they had to carry everything out there. There was nothing they could do but carry it out. That's the reason they probably failed in use. But the Fontana building was originally making spaghetti. And when it was condemned 3 times before the Army got it, and they transferred us over to Fort Mason, and we became part of that cadre. And I went to the Fort Surgeon's office as a first sergeant, because all of them had shipped out us done something. And I stayed as a corporal, technician, 5th grade pharmacist. And after about a year, I had pneumonia one time, and I got sick and was supposed to go on the ship. My bags were packed, but I went to hospital for pneumonia. And I stayed there about 3 or 4 days and got out and went back, and I went back to the Fort Surgeon's office, and finally I got aboard ship, but I wrote my own orders. And I was a pharmacy tech on board ship. And we went to the islands, went to Hawaii 5 times, New Guinea a couple of times, Hollandia, New Guinea. Luzon, that's the last place I was. And then we were shipwrecked. We ran aground on a rock, a reef, uncharted. And we stayed on that 3 days, and then the captain noticed his ship was moved, his compass moved. And it floated off. But in the meantime, we did a 15-degree list. It was just as dark in the afternoon as it was at night. We were groping along about 10 knots. And we debarked all the troops, and we tried 3 LCDs and an ocean-going tug, pushing and one pulling port side. No, lefty port, yeah, push it. The other one pushed it on starboard. And it floated off, and all the troops was off. And the captain came on, and he said, "The ship is now on its own." And he was still going sideways. Now it's on their own power and will proceed to port. So then we made trips to Australia, Hollandia. We were the second load going to, in a flotilla, going to the Luzon, Philippines. And we left the Philippines and came back and debarked everybody that we brought back. And we brought the second load of the battalion death marchers back to San Francisco.
How did they look? Really rough? I mean, were they?
Well, I remember one guy that's like this. I said, "What happened to him?" He's a freckle-faced, nice-looking fella in the face. He said, "A Jap worked me over with a bayonet." You see, they didn't shoot those guys that fell out during the march. Have you run into this guy that was a battalion death marcher that was from Clemson? I know him. He's a hell of a guy. Nice fella.
Is that Ben Scarden?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he and I have enjoyed talking to one another. And he told me his story, and of course I read it, and I have it on paper there too. Well, then we left San Francisco and went down through the canal, Panama Canal, and went over to Le Havre, France. And that was rubble. It wasn't anything standing. It was just brick rubble. There were holes in steel that thick where they'd been shot. Pillboxes blown out of the ground. And
so on most of these places, you got off the ship, and you
I went ashore to see what was there.
And so you did that in the Pacific Islands as well?
Yeah. I hate to tell you about going out to Far Eastern Air Force, meeting a whack I'd met on board ship. And it was we went out, and it was a crag over a little stream, and a big old rock, and we climbed up on that rock, and that's where we dated. And nothing going on but just goodness.
Yep.
Yeah. But we came back to New York with the White Wolf Division, or whatever they called them, the Wolf Division. 7,500 double load. They could sleep in one, they changed shifts sleeping. And the guys could have 2 meals a day, that's all they could have. Because they couldn't feed that many. We were only equipped to feed 4,500. The ship was 37 and a half feet long and was 23,000 tons. And 5 rounds around a deck, and one little half laugh was a mile. It was about, I don't know, 5 or 6 stories tall from the top to the bottom. And it was calibrated down to the red, and it was 18 foot. And I've seen that come out, that red showing in waves that were 3 stories high. And one time we were going along on the waves, and all of a sudden a freak sea wave, and it hit the bottom. You felt like a shot with a torpedo. But it was all right that they came in and went to dry dock. And man, that ship was tall. The forecastle head, water would splash over it when it went down in the trough. And when it's in port and was unloaded, the forecastle head was a bow, and you looked down on a 3-story building. It was a warehouse. And we left New York and went to Le Havre, France. And when I see somebody stepping on the flag, I want to shout and tell them to get off. I'd rather kill them first. In Le Havre, France, there was a tremendous amount of well, rise and fall of the level of the water. And there was one ship with one red flag American on it in that whole harbor. And you think that wasn't a beautiful sight? That warmed your heart, buddy. Consequently, we left there and went straight to Luzon with a bunch of people.
Straight from France to the Philippines?
Yeah. 33 days. We had about 125 women and nurses and other people with females and 4,500 men. It was a terrible, terrible trip. And we got back and went back to Honolulu. I don't know, we went to Honolulu 5 times. But I went back to Honolulu and I got back and I was going to be sent home. So I was offered a first sergeant, but I said, no, I don't think I will, I'm going home. So I got home in 4 days and 3 nights on a bus. And boy, from then on I was a lost ball. I never could settle down. And finally I got my degree in pharmacy and got registered and I was ready to go.
So, do you think the reason why you couldn't settle down is because you were traveling all over the world?
I don't
with
know.
Your army?
I really don't know. I wasn't settled enough to get down and study as much. But I made it. I just stuck with it. And I was a good pharmacist.
Now, how was it living, on a ship for 2 years? How long do you think you lived on that ship?
18 months.
I mean, that would.
Okay,
did you get seasickness?
Yes, the first trip I was sick, but then one other time I got nauseated because of the rough weather. I never did. I said I was wave happy. But on that ship, I was the one in charge of biologicals, and I had the men getting shots going overseas. And we had a detachment of black men, 1,500, that needed 3 shots, cholera, typhus, and plague. So we lined up, and that was when you had 10 cc syringes, and 1 cc of certain cholera, typhus, or plague that you gave each man a shot and hit him 3 times with 1 cholera, 1 typhus, 1 plague. That's when you change needles and fill syringes. You can imagine 1,500, how many times you change syringes and change needles. There was 1 man boiling syringes, 1 boiling needles, 1 putting the cholera, typhus, and plague in the syringe, and 1 man putting on needles, 1 man swabbing arms on both sides, and there's 3 of us. I was shooting cholera, and the other was typhus and plague. And you'd shoot, hand the syringe over, man change syringe needles, give you it back, and you mash a little bit to throw it was in there, and shoot him in the deltoid because there's not likely to hit a blood vessel. So 1 man passed out. He was allergic to the needle. But I got a headache all afternoon, 1 arm after another, one after another. And Another thing, why in the world would they do a Peter parade where you check for crabs and you milk it down and see if it runs? On the ship, nothing there. One time we had 3,500 whacks going over the Far Eastern Air Force. That was a consignment of females. And you can imagine those girls were bras around the equator where it was 120 and I mean, it got hot. And somehow or another I concocted a powder, of just plain powder, and used 1% peppermint and 1% can't think of it right now. No, it hadn't used it in a long time. But it was a it was a germ killer, and it was an anesthetic as well. But out of all of those girls, one girl came to me and she was mad as heck because it blistered her. She was allergic to either one or the other. And of course, she was mad, but I said, I can't do anything about it because that's all I had. But
Did you have a nice room on the ship, or were you?
It was 3 of us in there, I believe, and I slept on the top bunk, and I slept with my hands holding on to the rods. The rods were a pipe, about a half inch or 3/4. And I went to sleep that way.
So you wouldn't fall?
Well, I just did. I don't know why. But we had fresh water once a day to take a bath. But the girls had salt water and saltwater soap. The troops traveling over had salt water and saltwater soap. But I had one tap in the pharmacy that had, well, it had salt water part of the day. I had to work to get it out. But anyway,
how was the food on the ship?
Okay, I hate to tell you, but the crew was a merchant marine. Gun tub was Navy, and the complement of the provisional ship platoon, which I was part of, and the major was, our captain was a troop transport commander, and the ship captain was a merchant marine, and so was the crew. And we learned very quickly that you could get things that you needed. I had only a refrigerator, and I had the fella to come up and charge it with Freon. That's when you had Freon, after they changed. But I got to be acquainted with him, and I knew Freon was a refrigerant. And he and I stuck up and he was in charge of refrigeration. Now what do they have down there? Strawberries, everything it could freeze. And chocolate. Well, he couldn't get any sandwiches. We could, the crew could get sandwiches. We bought them from the crew. We'd buy him sandwiches, he'd bring us strawberries in a pitcher with ice cream.
A pitcher with ice cream?
And strawberries. So we had ice cream and strawberries. And we gave him a sandwich because he couldn't get it down there. And the crew had the same chef they had during peacetime. And a merchant marine waiter waited on us. And we had a fellow with a well, he had a uniform, I guess, but he had English rarebit, Salisbury steak, any kind of food you wanted was brought to us by Merchant Marine. And then when I made staff sergeant, I went into the main dining room and had silver like you have in a hotel, and had a waiter with a white jacket and black pants. And I went to eat a certain time every day, morning and night, and noon, and was waited on. Now one trip we brought back over 3,000 wounded, airplane dispense. Could not take care of themselves, but they had a buddy that did. And men with fingers, grotesque, just trying to save them. I found I had some dirt in the soap, so I filtered it. I had a filter I could put on the salt water and run it through, and it would draw it out through a filter. I had a double filter, and it came out, and the filter was dirty, but it came through clear, and I filtered gallon after gallon after gallon so the guys could get clean. And we had 17 cases one time, weeping from head to foot. They were in sawgrass and stuff, crawling, and they called it jungle rot. So those guys, some of them walked off. They got out of their litter. And they were, well, 3 days out it got cold into San Francisco, 50-something degrees. And I saw a guy shaking, and he had a little old coat or something on him. I said, "Soldier, wouldn't you like a blanket?" He said, "No, sir." I said, "Why? I'm not itching." Those boys cleared up when they got cool. I don't know what, it was acid. Well, you couldn't treat it with acid. But we had boric acid, and that's all we had, but it worked. I guess that's about the sum and substance. I did what I was told to do, and that's all I ever did.
Well, Mr. Carter, I thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me interview you.
Well, that's a thumbnail sketch.